That night, something shifted between us. Silent, unspoken, but impossible to ignore. Growing up, my younger brother Alex was always by my side. No matter where I went, he followed. Curious, eager to be included. He was the typical little brother, always looking up to me, always wanting to be part of my world. Unlike most siblings who drift apart with age, we stayed close. Maybe it was the chaos of our family that bound us together, like two people clinging to a raft in a storm. But lately, something felt different. Alex had changed. It wasn't anything obvious, just small, fleeting moments. His jokes felt off. His glances lingered a little too long. His presence carried a weight I couldn't define. It was as if a stranger had quietly stepped into my little brother's shoes, and I couldn't explain why. That evening, our parents were away for the weekend, leaving just the two of us in the house. The silence was unsettling, made heavier by the storm raging outside. I sat on the couch scrolling through my phone when Alex walked in with 2 cups of tea. "Thought you might want one," he said, handing it to me with a small smile. "Thanks, Alex," I replied, forcing casualness into my voice, trying to pretend the tension between us wasn't there. He sat beside me, closer than usual. The cushion dipped under his weight. We made small talk about meaningless things. The weather, a movie he had watched, funny stories from school. But beneath the words, something unspoken hovered between us, something neither of us was willing to acknowledge. "Remember that summer at the lake house?" he asked suddenly, his voice lower than before. "Yeah," I said, smiling at the memory. "How could I forget? You practically lived in the water." Alex chuckled, his eyes warm with nostalgia. "You were so patient with me, teaching me how to swim, even though I was terrible at it." I laughed. "You were terrible, but I didn't mind. It was one of my favorite summers." The silence that followed was heavy. His gaze settled on me, softer than I was used to. His hand rested on the couch, just a little closer to mine than I expected. Our fingers brushed, light as a whisper. My heart skipped. For a moment, the air between us thickened, charged with something I couldn't name. This was Alex, my little brother, the kid who had once pestered me with a million questions, the one I had taught how to ride a bike, the one who had always looked up to me. And yet, "Do you ever wonder how things might have been if life hadn't been so chaotic?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. I looked away, watching the raindrops streak down the window. Our family had been complicated, full of broken promises, late-night arguments, and silent wishes for something better. We had clung to each other because that was all we had. But now I wondered, had we held on too tightly? "Sometimes," I admitted, "but it's not something we can change, right? All we can do is live with it." "Yeah," he murmured, though there was something in his voice. Something sad, something longing. A flash of lightning lit up the room, and for the briefest moment, I noticed the way his hand barely touched mine, his fingers grazing my knuckles. I pulled back instinctively, letting out a nervous laugh. "Look at us, getting all deep and sentimental. We sound so grown up." Alex smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Guess we've been through a lot, huh?" I nodded. Silence returned. I wanted to change the topic, to bring back the easy laughter we used to share. But every time I tried, I felt that weight again, that lingering tension I couldn't shake. The storm outside grew louder, rain hammering against the windows as thunder rumbled in the distance. Strangely, the noise only made the silence between us sharper, like each drop of rain was emphasizing what neither of us dared to say. "I don't want you to feel like you have to take care of me," he said suddenly. I want us to take care of each other." I turned to him, caught off guard by the intensity in his eyes. He reached out, his fingers brushing mine once more. A touch so light, so hesitant, yet it sent a shiver through me. There was something in the way he looked at me, something I didn't understand, something that made my pulse quicken. I wanted to pull away, to laugh it off, to break whatever this was, but I couldn't move. "It's late," I finally managed, my voice barely recognizable. "We should get some sleep." He nodded but didn't move right away. His eyes lingered on mine, as if he wanted to say something, something that could change everything. But he didn't. "Good night," he murmured at last, standing up. His hand slipped from mine as he walked away, his footsteps soft against the wooden floor. I watched him go, my heart pounding, the weight of something unknown pressing down on me. One quiet night, the living room felt different, like an unseen barrier had shifted. Something unspoken lingered in the air, reshaping everything with just one fleeting moment. Growing up, my younger brother Alex was always by my side, following me around no matter where I went. He was the typical little brother, curious, eager, always wanting to be included. Even as we grew older, when most siblings naturally drifted apart, he stayed close. Maybe it was the chaos of our home life, the need to hold on to something familiar. But lately, things had changed. It wasn't anything obvious, nothing I could point to directly. It was more like a series of subtle shifts, a different tone in his voice, glances that lingered a second too long, a quiet weight in his presence that hadn't been there before. He still joked, still acted the same, but something felt different. That evening, with our parents away for the weekend, the house was eerily silent. A storm raged outside, making the quiet even heavier. I sat on the couch scrolling through my phone when Alex walked in, holding 2 cups of tea. "Thought you might want one," he said, offering me a cup with a small smile. I took it, mirroring his smile. "Thanks, Alex." He sat beside me, closer than usual. The cushion sank slightly under his weight. We made small talk about meaningless things, the weather, a movie he had watched, something funny that happened at school. But beneath it all, there was something unsaid, something I couldn't name. "Remember that summer at the lake house?" he asked suddenly. I smiled at the memory. "Yeah, you practically lived in the water." He chuckled, his eyes soft with nostalgia. "You were so patient, teaching me how to swim. I was terrible at it." "You were," I laughed, "but it was one of my favorite summers." The room fell silent. He looked at me, his gaze softer than I was used to. His hand rested on the couch, just inches from mine. As he shifted, his fingers brushed against mine. It was barely a touch, but it sent a strange jolt through me. I swallowed, my heart beating just a little faster. The storm outside intensified, rain drumming against the windows. It made the silence between us feel even louder. Alex exhaled, his voice barely audible over the rain. "Do you ever wonder how things might have been if life had been different?" I looked away, watching the raindrops trace lines down the glass. "Yeah," I admitted, "but we can't change the past." "I know." He hesitated. Sometimes I wish we could." His voice carried something I couldn't quite place. Longing, maybe, or regret. The words felt heavy, like they carried more meaning than I was ready to acknowledge. Another flash of lightning illuminated the room for a split second, making everything feel even more surreal. I forced a laugh. "Look at us, getting all deep and sentimental. We sound so grown up." Alex smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Guess we've been through a lot, huh?" I nodded, the weight of unspoken things settling between us once more. The tension wasn't something I could ignore anymore, but I wasn't sure I wanted to name it either. So I let it stay there, lingering in the quiet, in the space between words, in the spaces between us. The days that followed were filled with an awkward silence that neither of us knew how to break. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was overthinking. But no matter how much I tried to convince myself, I couldn't forget the way Alex had looked at me that night, the quiet intensity in his eyes, the way his presence felt different now. I was hyper-aware of him, noticing every glance, every small touch that felt heavier than before. One afternoon, as I walked down the hallway, I found him sitting on the floor, his back against the wall, a notebook open on his knees. He looked up as I approached, his expression unreadable. "Hey," he said quietly. "Got a minute?" I hesitated before nodding, sitting beside him. The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken thoughts. Finally, he exhaled. "I know things have been weird," he admitted, staring at the floor. "I don't want you to feel uncomfortable." I swallowed hard. "I'm just trying to figure things out." He nodded slowly. "Me too." There it was, the unspoken truth hanging between us, something neither of us had dared to say out loud. My heart pounded as I reached out, placing my hand over his in a small gesture of reassurance. His fingers tightened around mine, and for a moment we just sat there, the rest of the world fading away. "I don't know what to do," he whispered. Neither did I. And that terrified me. His gaze was fixed somewhere beyond the screen, his expression unreadable. There was tension in his posture, a quiet intensity that mirrored the racing of my own thoughts. Finally, unable to bear the silence any longer, I turned to him, my voice barely above a whisper. "Alex, are you okay?" He looked at me, his eyes darker than usual, filled with an emotion I couldn't quite name. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice soft, almost vulnerable. "I keep thinking about us, about what's happening." His words hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. My breath caught as his gaze settled on me, searching my face as if looking for answers. Slowly, he reached over, his hand resting on top of mine, his fingers warm and steady. My pulse quickened at his touch, a shiver running down my spine. I didn't pull away. I couldn't. Instead, I found myself leaning into the warmth of his hand, my fingers curling around his, holding on to the moment as if it were something precious, fragile. A kind of silence filled the room, a quiet understanding that needed no words. He moved closer, his arm brushing against mine, his presence overwhelming. I could feel his breath, warm and steady, as he looked at me, his gaze intense, unwavering. Then, with a hesitant motion, he lifted his hand and brushed a stray strand of hair from my face, his fingers lingering against my cheek. "Is this okay?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper, his eyes searching mine for permission. I nodded, barely able to find my voice. My heart raced as I felt his hand on my face, his touch soft, gentle. My eyes closed for a moment, savoring the warmth, the closeness, the way his hand felt against my skin. It was a feeling I had never experienced before, a blend of comfort and excitement, something both familiar and new. Then almost hesitantly, he leaned in, his lips brushing mine in a soft, tentative kiss. It felt like a question, an unspoken request for something more, something deeper. My breath hitched as I leaned into him, my own lips responding, answering his silent question with a quiet certainty that surprised even me. The kiss deepened, slow and gentle, each moment unfolding like a secret. His hand slid to the back of my neck, pulling me closer, and I felt myself surrendering to the warmth, the tenderness, the feeling of being completely and utterly wrapped up in him. There was an intensity in the way he held me, a kind of gentleness that made my heart ache. When he finally pulled back slightly, his forehead rested against mine, his eyes closed, his breathing heavy. For a moment we stayed like that, caught in the stillness, neither of us daring to speak, afraid to break the fragile quiet that had settled over us. "I've wanted this for so long," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I just didn't know how to say it." I reached up, my fingers brushing his cheek, feeling the warmth of his skin, the roughness of his stubble. "Me too," I admitted, my voice barely audible. "But I didn't think you felt the same." He opened his eyes, his gaze intense, filled with a quiet determination. "I've tried to hide it, to pretend it wasn't there, but I can't anymore. I don't want to pretend." His words sent a thrill through me, a quiet affirmation of everything I had been feeling, the emotions I had been trying to deny. I felt myself smile, a soft, almost shy smile as I looked at him, my hand still resting on his cheek, my heart swelling with warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. He leaned in again, his lips finding mine, the kiss deeper this time, filled with a quiet urgency, a need neither of us could deny. His hands moved to my waist, pulling me closer, and I felt myself melting into him, into the moment, into the feeling of being completely consumed by him. It was as if the universe had condensed into this singular moment, the world outside with all its rules and expectations, dissolving into insignificance. Time lost all meaning as we surrendered to the intensity of the moment, our heartbeats synchronizing, a soothing melody resonating deep within us. I felt the rush of emotions, the thrill of connection, and the security of being enveloped in his presence. In this fleeting instant, we were unstoppable, untethered, and unguarded. Our connection transcended words, a symphony of emotions playing in perfect harmony. But reality had a way of creeping back in. The weight of our secret grew heavier, an unspoken tension settling between us. We knew that our lives couldn't remain in this hidden corner forever, that sooner or later, we would have to face the consequences of what we had found. One evening, as we sat together on the porch, the stars twinkling above us, I felt a surge of emotion, an overwhelming need to say something, to put into words the feelings that had been building inside me. Alex, I began, my voice barely more than a whisper, I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if we can keep going like this. He looked at me, his gaze filled with understanding, a sadness that echoed my own. I know, he replied softly, but whatever happens, you'll always have a place in my heart. His words filled me with a bittersweet ache, a longing I couldn't ignore. What we had was rare, something precious, but it was also something that couldn't last, a fleeting moment that would eventually fade away. And yet, in that moment, with his hand in mine, I felt a quiet peace, a certainty that no matter what came next, I would carry this memory with me, a part of him forever etched into my heart. As the days turned into weeks, the weight of our secret became unbearable. We began to pull back, a silent understanding between us, a recognition that this chapter would soon have to close. One evening, as we sat together in the dim light of the living room, I looked at Alex, a sense of finality settling over me. I think it's time we let go. My voice was thick with emotion as I whispered, and he nodded, a sadness in his eyes, but also a quiet acceptance. Maybe you're right, he replied, his hand resting on mine. But that doesn't mean this wasn't real. It doesn't mean it didn't matter. We sat there in silence, our hands intertwined, a shared understanding that this was a moment we would both carry with us, a memory that would remain, even as the world around us moved on. As I looked at him, a tear slipped down my cheek, a quiet acknowledgement of the loss, of the ending we both knew was inevitable. He reached up, wiping it away, his touch gentle, a final act of tenderness that felt like a goodbye. In the days that followed, we slowly drifted apart, a quiet distance settling between us, filled with the echoes of everything we had shared. We returned to our routines, our lives intertwining in subtler, quieter ways. As siblings, as friends, as two people who had shared something that would never be spoken of again. But even as we conformed to the roles the world expected of us, I knew what we had was rare, something that had changed me in ways I couldn't fully understand. And though we never spoke of it, I could feel that he carried it with him too. A quiet reminder of a time when we had let our hearts lead, even if only for a fleeting moment. The years passed and our lives took us in different directions, our paths diverging, yet always seeming to lead back to each other. There was a comfort in knowing he was there, a steady presence, a quiet assurance that, no matter what, we would always share an unspoken bond. And though the memory of those days softened over time, growing quieter, it remained a part of me, a quiet echo of the person I had been, of the love we had shared, however briefly. Some things I realized are meant to be treasured quietly, carried in the heart like a secret, a memory that only grows more precious with time. And though life moved on, carrying us with it, that part of my heart would always be his, a quiet corner no one else would ever touch. We never spoke of it again. It became our silent understanding, our shared history, a chapter forever ours, locked away in the quiet spaces of memory. And though the years changed us, though our lives moved forward, I knew he would always be a part of me, as I was a part of him. It was a love that needed no words, no explanations, just the quiet certainty that we had been there, that we had loved, even if only in the silence of our own hearts. If you like this video, please subscribe my YouTube channel for more interesting videos. Thanks.